Okay, welcome to another episode of If You're Lost, I Was in Your Shoes podcast. And we've been gone for a little bit. I've been quite busy with my personal content and also fast work in general. But I've been getting a lot of requests either through Instagram to TikTok comment that they really want to see the podcast session. So we're resuming it. And our first guest on our resuming podcast is Nikon. ชื่อภาษาไทยคือ James.
Nikon James.
Nikon James is a transformational coach. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that.
Sure. So firstly, thank you to CK and Fastworks for hosting me. I'm a big fan of your work and your podcast and your content. I really believe in your mission of connecting Thai freelancers to the world. I think that's such a powerful mission and more power to you and everybody on your team. Transformational Coach is, another way of thinking of it is also a catalyst. You know, I recently found the Chinese word, guiyin. Guiyin is it's a fortunate person that you meet that makes you become more abundant, more wealthy, more successful.
It's called catalyst.
ใช่ catalyst, guiyin. And also, I think what I really do is I help people connect to a deeper part of their mind where they're just infinitely more creative, more impactful, more powerful. They're filled with love. They're more inspirational and they get more out of themselves. Because I think that most people, and you can probably know this from your own work, is that most people operate from very limited capacity of their own potential. And I think my work is helping them to expand that capacity so they can express more of their power into the world.
So who are when you talk about your people,
right.
Who are the customers?
That's a good question because I've worked with Olympians, executive chefs, executive leaders, CEOs, founders, all across the board. And what I found is what they all had in common was the problem. So the problem became the niche, if you think about it. So the problem was they knew that more was possible for them. They knew a bigger world inside of them was just waiting to get out, but they couldn't tap into that potential. Like the door was closed. So nobody told them where to look to find that power or strength within them. People are so used to doing the way things are doing is that they just need somebody to point out how to be more
That's
impactful.
Interesting. I would think that, leaders, whether it's executive chef or founder, they have high egos. Like these people have high egos to actually reach out for help.
Right.
I think that is a very surprising to hear that people would actually would lower the ego and actually admit that they're not good enough and they need help.
Well, if you think about it, actually that's a good point. I found that I would say new leaders have a lot of ego because when people say ego and they're experiencing ego, you're really experiencing somebody's insecurity and fear. That they need to be bigger and more because they're really afraid of who they really are.
Yep.
But if you think about real leaders, anybody from the NBA or anybody who goes to the Olympics, you can't even enter the Olympics without a coach or a support team. LeBron James pays millions of dollars for a support team, his trainer, his nutritionist, his coach, his basketball coach. So I think the leaders who are doing really well in the world and who do well consistently, they all have teams of people supporting them. I have teams. I imagine you have teams of people. I think that's it. Is those are the leaders who really stay and go the distance.
I see.
And the people who try and do it by themselves, I think they might be really loud on social media, but you look back after 4 or 5 years, are they still there? And most of them aren't.
So how is your business more push or more pull, meaning that are you actively acquiring customer or a customer actually coming to knock on your door?
Actually, both. I think in this work, in my kind of work, where like I'm the brand, like my face is the brand.
Absolutely.
The more people experience me through things like podcasts or books or articles, and they just get a sense of, oh, I want more of that.
Yep.
And so it's more pull. And in terms of push, where I think I'm very fortunate to be in a lot of circles where I meet a lot of people. And sometimes I just tell people like, wow, like I really see this as being possible for you. Would you like to have a conversation about that?
Interesting.
And I think it's a gift to be able to see that in people, see their true nature and their potential and possibility. Like I think everybody has it, but nobody has really nurtured that muscle. Like for you, I bet you real money that when you see new hires in your company, you see so much potential for them and possibility.
Yep.
And that people like that might never have met someone like you who actually believed in them. And because they met you, they'll be far more than they could ever imagine.
And then, I mean, there are also cases where
the opposite is true.
I'm not the right person.
You're
for
not
them.
the right one. And
Absolutely.
you can be like, you know what? I'm not the right guy for you.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. So how long have you been doing this for?
I would say professionally about 5 to 6 years, but I think I've been doing it all my life because I used to be a professional taekwondo player.
Ooh.
Right. And I was never on the national team, but I played for the Chonburi province and Nakhon Sawan province. I went to like all the กีฬาแห่งชาติ I competed in France, Mexico, USA, Korea, all over the world by myself. And through that life, I was coached a lot all the time. I always had a coach tell me what to do or how to grow. But at the same time, in that sport, I also had to bring up the next generation of fighters and athletes. So I was always coaching my peers or students or things like that.
I see.
And I just got used to that world. And that's when I got a job in corporate life, I was like, what do you mean there are no mentors or peer support? Like, how am I supposed to grow? And I realized, oh, it doesn't exist. Now it does. But 10 years ago, like getting a mentor or peer support at a job, especially entry level, was non-existent.
Were there a lot of similarities with your coaching technique and with, you know, the mixed martial art world versus the actual corporate world?
Yeah, a lot. I think ultimately, people have a lot of different words for what coaching is or isn't, but to me, it's your art. It's like, how do you express your art? And it changes from person to person. I think any model that requires trying to fit the person into the model is a flawed model. Right? I think how you show up to each person is incredibly important. And so for me, it's about really being present for the person and really leaving yourself at the door and your ego and your whatever, and just really listening, like really listening to them and seeing what's on offer for them and how you can help them and what's possible for them. And sometimes it does look like a hard conversation where you have to say things. My favorite thing I got from my mentor, Michael Neal, when he would tell people something, he would have to say something really hard to them. He said, I want to ask your permission for you not to like me for the next 10 seconds.
Okay.
It would be quiet. And then he would just, and he would just say a thing and he'd be like, your jaw would drop. But like, wow, like, but because he asked it that way, he's asking psychological permission for you to hear it.
Wow. Today, we're going to discuss firsthand about core issues or common issues that you have received from your clients,
right?
And what are some of the issues that you've seen quite often, and what are the ongoing issues, and with or without COVID, where do you see the trend is going with, you know, the obstacle or the difficulties that are faced by most leaders, not just founders. So what are some of the issues that you want to talk about?
I would say, I think the premise for this conversation has been like, right, leaders and founders. I think lately my work has ventured into working with tech founders. And it just naturally happened in meeting founders and talking to them. And I really saw a lot of opportunity to help them. And so some of the problems, and you can nod if you're like, yeah, me too. It's overwhelm, loneliness, imposter syndrome, stress, pressure, depression, anxiety. I would say a sense of disconnectedness with themselves, with their family. Like all those things combined, and you put them in if you put them in one pill, every founder is taking that every day. And I thought about it. I had an insight today. A long time ago, the way people do business today is very different. A long time ago, for a founder to scale their business, it would take 5 to 10 years, and you would slowly grow, and that founder would slowly develop as a person.
That's like what, 20 years ago?
20 years ago.
Yeah.
But if you think about it,
now
the founder had time to adjust and develop along the way. But now we're talking scaling to those levels. It would normally take 30 years in 1-2 years. And so if you think about how messed up is that, it would be the equivalent of taking a first grader, letting them go to school for 6 months and saying, okay, great, welcome to Binan or year one at university. Like, holy shit. How is a human being supposed to adapt? Right? You can see it now, right? And so I think that's where all the problems are coming from, because you're forced to grow so quickly at things you're not like, you need way more support than you've ever needed before.
I think a lot of people are lonely, depressed, or whatever it is. I think I have one answer for them, is that they're not doing it for the right reason. You don't build businesses to become a unicorn. That is not the point of business, right? You don't buy a car to fill gas. Right. You buy a car to travel from point A to point B. Whatever it is, right? You buy a car to go from point A to point B. Filling gas is a byproduct. A company, you build a business to actually deliver value for a customer.
Right.
If it's a drink, if it's a product, you make great, you have a restaurant, you want to serve great food. You want to provide great service. Whatever it is, you want to make your customer happier than what they was before they met you, right? That is the point of business. Making money, being a unicorn, it's a byproduct of that.
A long time ago, I used to think that money, status, and power would solve most of my problems, like in my 20s. And then I started working with clients who had all that, like Olympic athletes, celebrities, influencers, top level CEOs, executives. And they had all the things that I wanted and they were still sad.
Yep. They're not happy.
And not happy. And then I realized that then that shifted for me, or it wasn't that. So then I found that the people who were happiest were people who were just genuinely content with what they had. And fascinatingly, they were the more successful inside and out, because somebody interviewed my mentor, Michael Neal, and they asked him, like, what do you want to be in 5 years? And he said, happy. I think what we're talking about really is a deceleration and a de-hyping of people and things, and coming back to what really matters, which is like how you show up in the world. Are you of service? Are you doing this for ego, or because if I become a unicorn, I will feel more safe? Like you're never gonna find that.
100%, because that, I think what your point that you just mentioned is absolutely right. Because similar is back to my point of they're not doing it for the right reason. Is because they're not doing it for what they actually want. Right? Being a unicorn is important. Is that actually what you think is important, or what they think is important? Right? You're brainwashed by society every day that your goal as a startup is to be a unicorn. Your goal as a startup is to be publicly listed. And when people don't even question why is being a unicorn so important? Why is being publicly listed so important? And they think that they get to brainwash this thing that, oh, money's success. I do this for money. I do this for money. I do this for money. But they forgot to ask themselves, ignore all the noises, erase all the noises, all the definition of happiness that people are imposing on you. Have you ever asked yourself what actually makes you truly happy? I'm not talking about the money. I'm not talking about status. I'm talking about, is it having a cup of coffee in the morning? Is that what makes you happy every day? It's very hard to constantly remind yourself that how lucky you already are. We can be in a jungle. We could have been a jungle with no food, right? The fact that, like, you know, we get fresh water. We can go outside and get fresh water. People forget about the little things, you know, that they're lucky for. Cannot blame them as well. It's what circumstances, you know, we are constantly, with social media, we're constantly comparing ourselves with other people, right? My startup and that startup, this person and that person. What are you wearing? What are they wearing? It's tough. It's tough.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, I love what you said, is that you can't blame. Well, let's take you, for example. You're doing this podcast. You have 1,000,010 things to do. Like, gratitude probably is not at the top of your list. And I think that's why having conversations like this that help remind you of those things, or at least in my work, why people hire me, like as a coach, or you have your own personal support team to help you spend more time being at your best. Because I think what I'm hearing from you is, when you do drop in those moments, when you can feel natural gratitude of, like, wow, like, I'm really grateful for my office, my staff, my producer, that's probably when CK is at his best.
Because that's when I'm the happiest, right? Because I'm thankful, right? Because it's to remind myself that these are not promised. And
I love
you.
that.
You didn't have to DM me. You didn't have to come here. You didn't have to say yes. You didn't have to respond to my DM, right? He doesn't have to accept the job.
There's something you said that I think is really powerful, that tomorrow's not promised.
And I think the example that he raised, I forgot it was his mom or his dad, but basically one of his parents got cancer or something terminal, right? That the doctor said he or she only had 3 months left. And then, so every single day he spent with his parent, they make sure that when they say goodbye, it's a proper goodbye. And then suddenly, the parents lived more than 3 months. So every day after that 3 months was the most quality time spent every single day, because they know that, shit, today's a gift. Before his or her parent passed away, he was like, those period of time was the most meaningful period of time ever, because he was thankful for every single day to be able to spend with them. Come back to the point, whether if it's our parents now, right? We take a lot of stuff for granted. I mean, even myself, right? Even myself that constantly reinforce this point, me myself too, sometime should be more thankful of things like my mom calling me today. I should have picked up earlier, or I should have called her before she called me. Or this business, even me having a shot at it, it's a once in a million opportunity. That's the one thing that I really want more people to understand how lucky they are, because I want more people to be more happy.
I think what you're really pointing at is a higher level of self-awareness and self-presence. I remember I was doing a venture building project and for a Thai company, and I won't mention which one. And it was a really, really difficult experience. And I was stressed out of my mind, super pressured. I hated everything and everyone. And what I did was I called my coach and I was like, Coach, I'm not doing well. And he reminded me of this conversation. His name is Steph Zibihowski. And I remember sitting on my kitchen floor in tears. And I was just like, Coach, I don't get it. I'm making more money than I've ever made. I have power, I have status. What am I missing? And it turns out I was doing it for all the wrong reasons, right? And then he just helped gently remind me that like you're breathing, you have a roof over your head, you have money in your bank account, like you're good. And I really had to surrender and kind of let life hold me and guide me, because I was not a good navigator at that point in time. Yeah.
So we talk about, gratitude,
Right.
not taking for granted. Are there any other problems that you have seen from founders, other than being depressed, overwhelmed, stressed? Was there any other thing that you see as a problem that are upcoming?
I think what occurs to me to say is, like we talked at the beginning of our conversation about the fast track that founders are put on to grow and scale businesses, but there's no real support for founders to accelerate their growth. I think that's a big problem. And I think that's why, that's my current mission, is to create the support for founders so they can accelerate alongside with their business and become the leaders and people who will change the world with their businesses. And that means slowing down, checking in, having conversations like this to really help them to become more self-aware.
With the term growing your business, I think that is a very, very dangerous term for me.
Yeah.
Because when a founder talk about they want to grow their business, I would ask them, is that what you want to do?
Right.
And why you want to do that?
So let me riff off that point is the premises that founders step into, where a lot of those times those questions that you just asked, most of the time they don't even have the power to answer that, because it's not up to them anymore. But
that's a problem.
Right, you're right. That is a problem. So it's their investors or teams like, well, of course you're going to grow, because if you're not growing, why am I giving you money and why am I working for you? And so you're put in this really hard position where you're forced to grow even though you're not ready.
I think the flaw comes from the infrastructure at the very beginning is the pressure from constant VC. And more importantly, even when you go into the public market, it's the pressure from Wall Street, pressure from the public market, pressure from investor that you have to go through this direction. And they forgot about why the founder started this company. I doubt it that Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook to be like, oh, I want to spy on everyone. I want to make shit tons of money. That cannot be why he wanted to start. I mean, I don't know him personally. I'm just guessing, but I just cannot even imagine that a founder started a company for those reasons. I want to start this company because I want to make money. No, a lot of people start a company because they actually they think that this is a better way to do things. This is how we can change the world.
Right. And I think that's where people like you and me or coaches come in, like coaches who work with founders, come in to help them navigate that, to ask those questions. Like Paul Myers in Singapore, I love his questions like, why are you doing this?
My question to you is then, let's just say that we tell this founder to start asking these kind of questions, but he said that I have an investor behind my back that they would not buy this. Right. So what would your advice be?
I would say, if I was talking to the founder, I would say that their well-being is probably the most important thing in the room at the moment. Because if they're well, then they're more clear, then they can really communicate better with VCs, right? They can really communicate what they want in boundaries. Because I used to be really bad. I used to like say yes to everything. I would like never say no because I'd feel bad. But until somebody told me that I could say no. Yeah. And that really changed things for me. And I didn't feel powerful enough to say no, meaning and I found that like I live in a better world for myself around me.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And so that's why I think in this conversation with this conversation is when that happens, the problems of the founders kind of double, the stress, the anxiety, the pressure. And so I think having a founder wake up to their innate potential will not only help them thrive through that stuff and that kind of bullshit, and to just do better business.
Yes, to do better business, I think focus on the product. If your product is not selling, it's nobody's fault. It's because you're not good enough. Right. The market is never wrong. Never wrong. People do so much this and not this. Yeah. It's my fault. I take accountability for everything. If Fastwork have problem, customer have problem, whatever it is, it's my issue. Not investor issue, not the market is wrong or I don't have enough money. Your product is not good enough.
Right.
The market is never wrong. And even before that, you got to ask yourself, are you solving a big enough problem? That is so, I mean, a lot of founders get into wishful thinking in a way that they think that what they're doing is so important, but they don't have the empathy to actually ask if they were the customer that doesn't know this company before, is this a big enough problem?
Right.
If you're trying to make a pair of shoes with more shiny stuff around it, is that an issue in the market? Right? You really have to be honest. And if you cannot be honest with yourself early on, you're gonna learn it the hard way.
Right. And I think what you're pointing out is a lot of very obvious things that aren't obvious to founders. In my world, I think one of the biggest things I help my clients with is to slow down their minds, because when their minds slow down, things become more clear, things become more obvious. I wonder, you as a founder, like what's your edge right now? Like what kind of things or challenges are you facing?
So for me, right, I'm trying to build freelancing a gig economy.
Right.
And I try to push more people to use freelancer instead of full time because, cost saving, fixed cost of variable cost, whatever it is. It's actually a great option. But the major challenge is quality, right? Most of the people with the mindset is that, full time is more quality, has more quality. That's not true.
Right.
I'm trying to prove that to people. And that's hard, right? To prove to people that, freelancers have great quality. So I actually invest in a lot of tasks and stuff like that to make sure that my freelancers are qualified. Because I always say this to myself that in my mind, I'm only selling to 100 customers.
Right.
In my mind, it's only 100.
So
actually, in my mind, just one.
So my question as a founder is, in terms of the founder perspective, like how are you now dealing with things like imposter syndrome or loneliness or stress and pressure? Like how does that look like to you now?
So for me, stress and pressure, I mean, how am I dealing with it now? For me,
how does it look like to you now?
It's am I dealing with it well? Probably not the best. But for me, I won't be stressed about the little things.
Right.
And in a matter of fact, I don't think I'm a very stressful person in any way, because I always keep my eye on the long term. I don't focus on short term. I don't focus on short term results. Never. Like people get stressed most of the time because, like, for example, if they're traders, oh shit, I lose money today. I make money today. I lose money tomorrow. But in my mind, I always look at the long term. For me, like I give an example, like crypto market down, people are stressed, but I'm not stressed because I look at 10 years. Or if, for example, business is not doing well now, it's fine. But what we're doing internally is the right direction, right? I'm doing gift first content. I'm building quality of freelance. I don't do advertising, but I use all the money to build quality of freelance, because I believe that product is the best advertisement. So when my eyes is always on 5-10 years, I don't get stressed with short-term movement at all. How am I doing today or next month or the month after? Have no stress on me. Of course, it burns my money. I go to sleep every single day. I can answer to myself that I'm doing this for the right reason. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this to help my customer. That's it. So with the right intention, if your intention is pure and you have eyes on the long-term price, of course, do I get overwhelmed with a lot of stuff? Of course, sometime I do, yes. But I try to prioritize and look into the long term.
Right.
So what happened today, tomorrow means nothing to me.
Interesting. I mean, thanks for sharing. I think it's a really important point that you shared, because to show that just because you've reached this level of impact and growth and business, like you still deal with things like that, like overwhelm and stress and pressure. And that's why I realized working with founders, it wasn't a one-shot thing. It was a consistent level of support where they can continually check in and spend more time being at their best and consistently expanding their potential. And that's why it really, like, working with founders really interests me, or just high-performing people in general.
I have a question for you then.
Sure.
I want your honest opinion, because I don't have an answer for this. Do you think everyone is built to be a founder? Or do you think everyone can be developed into the founder material?
I'll tell you something my aunt told me, and she was a Montessori school teacher, and she founded one of the first Montessori schools in Pattaya. And she told me that there is a place for everybody in the world. If you had only founders, nothing would get done. Like nobody would, clean the streets or do your electricity or things like that. I think that when people really tap into their true nature and their potential, they really get in touch with this sense of what life has planned for them rather than what they want from life. And so some people are naturally inclined to be a founder and a leader. Some people are naturally inclined to be Olympians. And I think that to me, the answer to your question is about listening to what life wants from you rather than what you want from life.
But do you have clients that you're looking at the problems and how they deal with issue? You've been with them for 3-4 months. Do you ever feel with one of the clients that he or she just doesn't have what it takes? Or just not made for this? And would you honestly tell them that or you just let them be?
I think usually clients who hire coaches or work with consultants or catalysts, they're already accomplished a certain amount of world, like they're already on track. You know what I mean? Like, and they hire them to be or do more or grow or expand. But sometimes you're right, you do need some clients will tell me this idea and I would just tell them straight out, like, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, that's not your path. You know what I mean? And sometimes I really need to be their mirror and really reflect back to them what they're saying out loud so they can see, like, oh wait, this, like, ask them to check in, like, okay, what does life want from you right now? Where is life trying to guide you? And I think when you really listen to life, you end up in the right places at the right time. Like if tomorrow's like, okay, CK, like, you know, Nikon, I'm going to go be an Olympian. I want to go compete in France at the 2024 Olympics. I'm going to go run 100 meters. Like, you'll probably die, you know, because I don't think like you might get good at it, but the question you said in the beginning of like, what do you really want? Like, do you really want to do that because of your ego or you think you'll feel better? Like, what does your heart really want? And oftentimes that answer is a lot more simpler than people think. And I loved what you were saying about as founders is oftentimes they just want to solve a problem. And that's why they wanted to do it. Yeah. And everything else came with it, the funding or the money, the business. And I think as you're forced to grow, you lose sight of that, right?
You lose sight of that. The problem.
And I think you've seen a lot too, like not everybody wants to be a CEO. And most founders opt out of it. They hire CEOs because they didn't want to do that. I think for me, one thing I was grateful for early on in my coaching business, I didn't want to become Tony Robbins. Like, I don't want that life. I don't need that. Like, I'm really grateful for what I've created. And I hope that I'm more interested now in seeing where that takes me rather than like my own, like, oh, I need to be this or that. And then, that's my answer.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer.
What do you think? What do you think about it? What do you think?
I see the trend that we're going, right? It's that I really do believe that 20 years from now, we're going to come to the nature where nobody apply for jobs soon, right? And because everyone loves freedom. I think this has been an ongoing trend, and it's going to get bigger and bigger, right? The fight in Ukraine is fight for freedom. Yeah. Women's right, pride, everything. It's because of freedom. The reason why freelancer is the future, in my opinion, is because of freedom. So what does freedom actually means? Freedom, the most important commodity that we have in life is time. Right. Freedom is not just freedom to buy whatever you want. That, for me, is not the priority. The priority is freedom of time. Right. Do you dictate when you come to work? You dictate what you do today. You dictate that. People relate that with entrepreneurship, right? Because being an entrepreneur or self-employed, by default, you are your own boss, right? So I think the trend of entrepreneurship is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's good. It's a good thing, right? Entrepreneurship, what make this country, make any country better, right? So what you see, the trend is everyone become an entrepreneur. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room sells something online. You can have an IG store, you can sell something. But what also concerned me at the same time, right, is this thing called the pursuit of freedom is a very tough route.
I have a slightly different route. So in just reflecting on what you said is, I think freedom is a tough gig if it depends on other people and circumstances being the way you want them to be. So I'm only free if I have this job or if I have this business or these people agree with me or don't agree with me, then you lose control of freedom, paradoxically. To me, freedom, like, it's not a thing. Like, it's not a glass, it's not a pen, it's not a phone. I think it's if you look at it from the inside out, I think we're always free. I think I was talking to a big corporate and we were talking about doing a workshop together about how to help them feel more free. And what came out of my mouth was, you can't always control your circumstances, but you are always free in what you think. Like nobody can take that freedom away from you.
Yep.
And I've met people on all spectrums, people who work 9 to 5 who really feel free. Like they don't have to worry about where their next paycheck is coming from. And I was like, oh, you really feel free? Like, yeah, I am completely free. And I'm like, fascinating. And I met people on the other side of it who you couldn't pay them enough money to work 9 to 5. But there's a freedom in the way you approach freedom, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the beauty in what we're both pointing to is when you really realize that you have always been free in your decisions. And you said it. Software now allows, like, if you don't want to do 9 to 5, you are free to do something else.
Yes.
If you want to be a leader, you can go on YouTube and find out things. Like, we are so free now and we don't realize it. And I think the danger of freedom is that the moment your freedom depends on another person, circumstance, or thing, then you immediately have to control that. And usually you can't control that, so it backfires.
I agree. But I think this freedom, this notion of freedom, and combine it with humans' innate nature of always wanting more.
Right.
It's always going to be, it's never going to be enough freedom. What I mean by that. Yeah. When women rights first protest 1960 something, right? It was a freedom to vote.
Right.
And then now it's a freedom of pay, freedom of leadership, want a woman president, whatever it is, right? I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm just saying it's never gonna be enough. You can always be more free. And that's why I said the 9 to 5, yes, he might be free, but do that for 5-6 years. And one day you encounter a bad boss because he doesn't dictate who the boss is. The boss make him come in at stay till 4 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. Suddenly you feel less free. It's just a loop that we're, as human being right now, we're constantly chasing freedom. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's a good thing actually, because if you look at so many countries, U.S. established in what, in 1776 Declaration of Independence. You're from the U.S. So you know that. So the history of United States of America has been what, 300 years, right? 300 something years, and China been around for 3,000 years. But the U.S. was the first ever. George Washington was the first ever to introduce the idea of democracy. There's no monarchy, there's no king. It's a voting system, democracy system, where we rotate every 4 years. The freedom to choose your own leader. U.S. is actually the first country ever to really put the notion of freedom in the Declaration of Independence and literally in the entire culture. And look at where we've gotten them. 300 years, they're number one GDP. China, 3,000 years. Triple the population have less GDP than U.S. because of one thing, freedom.
To riff off that, there's a lot of there's the other sides. The U.S. is number one in a lot of things that are not so nice too,
of course,
right?
Of course.
Gun violence and drug abuse.
That's the amendment. That's a flaw in the amendment. Yes.
So I think when the pursuit of freedom, again, if it's dependent on outside circumstances, you're gonna have a lot of flaws and you're gonna have a lot of bumpy roads. And but I think if you really recognize that you always were free, then there's less angst to be and do more. Like, who's to say the farmer isn't free because he really enjoys being in nature? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Right. And I think it's beautiful what you and your company are doing, because you're giving people that more options to pursue freedoms in their own way, where they maybe a mother who wants to stay at home and do graphic design, doesn't want to work in an office, or doesn't like corporate structures or things like that. Like, how cool is that
another option.
your problem that you're solving, freedom, which I just understood just now, like, how cool is that? And I'm really grateful that you're doing it and that it's successful.
Thank you. It's getting better every day.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it successful yet. It's better every day. There's so much more to improve. Yeah. And I think we have talked a lot of topics. A lot. Gratitude, don't take it for granted, freedom, and what it takes to be a founder, the loneliness, all that. And I think that was a lot of great insight. I learned a lot. I learned a shit ton. And then really thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
And I look forward to maybe having you come back for a Thai language session. I really want this message to get out to a lot more founders. And because I want a lot more founders to be able to remind themselves again, as you said it before, they really start to solve a problem. Never lose sight of that. I don't care what it is. Never lose sight of why you started this at the very beginning. Argue with your parents for this. Why you leave your home for this. Why you sacrifice your stability for this. Because you want to solve this problem. You believe in this problem. don't let anything get in the way. That purpose, goal, intention that you have since the very beginning. It's actually the Bible throughout the journey. Never lose sight of that.
Right. Thank you, CK, for having me on. I really learned a lot in this conversation too. And it was really cool to see it like on the other side of the table, like what you're experiencing, what you're going through and your insights. And I love your message of remembering why you started, because I think there's an insight there of that's so clear. And I think that when you get busy, especially in your mind, that becomes very blurry. And what I see more clearly now is my work is to help people have more clarity of mind so that those things that are important are more clear.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.